AI is everywhere. It's in your inbox. It's in your competitor's pitch, in every industry conversation you're having right now. But here's the question business owners aren't asking loudly enough. Is any of it actually working? My guest today has built a company around one answer to that question. Their tagline says it all: less AI hype, more results. We're going to get into what that actually looks like, where to start, what's working, and what's not. We're excited to welcome Brandon Powell, founder and CEO of HatchWorks AI. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You know, it's interesting. I kind of equate it as like filtering through the noise, right? I mean, from when I run, our job for representing sellers when they're selling a company is our job is to filter through the noise and bring actual high qualified buyers to the table. And some are real, some are not real. So when I look at your business and your tagline, where's the hype hitting mostly right now that people is the noise part, right? What is people, because it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. It's on the news. It's on your iPhones or your whatever phone. It's in your email, like we talked about. What is the hype piece that people need to kind of like push off to the side?
Okay, I'm going to start off with a zinger to start, and that is that tools like Claude, which is that's a ton of what you hear about in the news, and ChatGPT. Those are incredible tools, and everyone kind of rushes to go buy their licenses. I've got clients that literally want are ready to spend millions on Claude tokens, but can't get a rep to even call them back. And that's when you look at those tools, at the end of the day, if you're going to transform your business, it's going to take a lot more than implementing Claude or implementing ChatGPT. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens in the hype is a lot of times you actually forget about some of the most classic, I have to say that now, classic AI use cases. Think about Uber dynamic pricing. It's been around for 15 years, right? In terms of how they do pricing. Think
Right.
about Amazon, right? When you shop on Amazon and it makes a referral for another product, that's classic AI. Huge value on the bottom line. And so I think the biggest thing right now is everyone gets caught up in the tools, and sometimes they miss some of these fundamental use cases like supply chain optimization that could be a game changer for their business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, people like rush to it, right? Like without really having a strategy, and they're not properly prepared. And so they end up spending a lot of time, but where do they really receive the results? And how do they see the return on their investment? Those type of things are things that I think people need to kind of take a deep breath a little bit, step back, think about. I mean, today, in all transparency, because I was really excited you were joining us, I use Claude, right? I mean, I use it on a test basis. I try to spend an hour a day, 10% of my day, kind of like just let me, and I've been doing, and I haven't put it into the company yet. I did a separate personal one because I want to kind of like see how it all works. I'm not just going to jump on it. And so I put together like the outline for today. I put together things for today. And then I looked at it and said, nah, not exactly what I was looking for. So I kind of, prompted it and changed things and whatnot. But, it takes a lot of work. It's
Right.
not going to be, it's not the end all to be all.
Yep. At the end of the day, it's another thing you need. There is no in AI, there is no one size fits all. You're not going to just do one thing with AI and transform your business. You're just not. It's a multitude of things that you have to do. And you mentioned that a lot of companies don't have a strategy. That's true. We do a lot of strategy work where we come in and try to figure out what is the roadmap. And then another thing I'm starting to see in bigger businesses is that there's like multiple strategies. It's like each department almost has its own thing that it wants to do and its own tool. And what's happening is you're seeing a massive fragmentation or decentralization in most of these organizations where it's like it's not even like they don't even have just Claude licenses. Like they might have chat licenses, Claude licenses, then this department's doing something else. And it's like, who's tying all of that together? Who's looking at the overall big picture of this business and saying what's really going to move the needle for what we're doing? And I'm seeing more and more of that where it's like it's kind of like a bunch of disparate parts within the business doing their thing with AI, and it's just getting further and further fragmented across the business.
So I think you referenced this report maybe on your website. I was saying, I think MIT did a study. 95% of people, AI pilots fail. Right? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And what what do you think? What do you think that? Why does that happen? What's going wrong there? I mean, why are these pilots just all of a sudden? You go through it, you spend the time, energy, money, people, the whole thing, and it's just not working.
Yeah, so you've got like at the highest level, you've got two types of companies. You got AI leaders, okay, and they don't fail at 95%. That's about 12, 13% of all businesses. They fail at like 35%. Still high, but we're talking about a probabilistic technology, and they fail forward and they learn from it. The bulk of the businesses that are in that 95%, and I see this, a lot of them, the biggest problem I see is they choose the wrong use case. Okay, I would say that over half of those pilots that fail, they've chosen a use case they never should have even started with. It was not a use
So,
case that was going to get them there.
so when you say use case, can you expand that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you an example I see a lot. I'll go into a business and they'll say almost every business has people that do accounts receivable and accounts payable, right? In finance. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's a general thing they do. And most companies, even like some sizable ones, they only have a couple of people that do that. And they'll say, we want to automate accounts payable. And I say, or accounts receivable. And I say, great. Well, let's look at the ROI on that. So what exactly is going to happen here? You have how many people doing this today? How much do they get paid? How much of that can we offload? And by the way, how risky is this? Most companies have millions and millions of dollars in accounts payable and accounts receivable. And they say, well, we want to do this process because it's back office, which is a great place to start, and it's not client facing. Okay. But the point of it is, at best, you're only got a couple people doing that role. You're never going to get the ROI. And so the risk is not worth the reward, because
Right.
one invoice that gets screwed up by an agent, that's a $2 million invoice that got messed up. You just lost your whole ROI on that one thing. Okay. And so I see a
Yeah.
lot of companies that they don't want to focus on an area where the biggest part of maybe their P&L is. I'd say start with the P&L. Where's your biggest cost center? Is it customer
Right.
service? Let's go there. You know, don't start with this area in your business where it's like two people and they do a good job at it, and you're just trying to go put AI in there because you think it sounds good and it's a nice place to start.
It's funny because you're right. Because to quit. So back in my prior to founding Osage, and years ago, I'm a CPA by training, and I had clients, family close. That's the same business I'm working with now, but as an advisor. And I remember going into a client's, and the bookkeeper, she'd be, back then you would manually reconcile your bank account every month, and this one case, and she was off like a nickel. She
Mhm.
would spend 5 hours trying to find it, and I finally
Yeah.
went to her and I said, "Forget it. I mean, it's costing $100 a time for a nickel. It's not worth it, right?" So, but that's it's the same situation, no technology versus where we are today. But your point, you're not going to see the benefit out of it, or very low benefit impact out of it. So, what would you say then? If I was a business owner, and again, the question's coming. On all our transactions now, how to use AI. I mean, what would you consider some of the high impact use cases that you should focus on if you're looking to implement an AI strategy for your company?
Yeah, so I will go back to the P&L. Every company is different, but I would focus where you have the most cost. Not because I'm suggesting that you take the cost out. A lot of companies, we work with a lot of PE-backed businesses, just like you help sell a lot of businesses. And if you look at that cost center, most of these are growing businesses. So if I can do customer care, because you got a lot of people doing customer care, and I'm not saying take them out, but I can automate some of that job function. So they're doing the most important part of customer care. You can scale that and you don't have to add more people. Okay. I get more customers that want to scale with less people than take people out. I don't see a lot of that where it's like, oh, I want to wipe out my customer care. Most of it is like reallocating those people. Every business is different. I can tell you where there's a lot of hotbeds. How do I automate a lot of the sales stuff so that my sellers can sell? I'm not talking about agents doing the selling. I'm talking about agents assisting the seller. I see massive opportunities on the software development side. Okay, so any of these companies that have any sort of developers, massive opportunities. But today, you should be at minimum seeing 50 to 70% more productivity from your software development teams if they actually know how to leverage AI. And so
Interesting.
I can find kind of good gold in every part of the business. Marketing. If you're not producing 80% of your content and you've not, I would say 10x the amount of content that you're producing from a marketing perspective across all platforms, there's something wrong, because these tools are simple to use. You don't need me. You can buy these tools and be able to produce at a level that we've never even seen before, in kind of from a productivity standpoint. So those are a few areas, but we can go in. You tell me a job, a function in a business, and I can typically find you use cases. I'll just say that I don't love finance. I know I gave that example earlier. I don't love finance yet. And the reason is there's typically not enough people in that space where it really moves the needle that much on the business. And to your point about the nickel part, like sometimes AI can just make that problem worse. And again, that's just today. But I like areas in the business where there's a lot of people doing something, or there's expensive people doing something. And how do we make them more efficient so they can work on the hardest part of that job?
It's interesting. You bring up, to our audience, you bring up, implementing an agent, right? So I had an experience, my first ever with an agent. I had decided I wanted to change my hotel reservation for a conference I'm going to in the fall. So I called up the number and they put me in contact. And also I'm hearing this voice and I'm going to this resort, which is like, it's on the beach. So you hear this waves in the background, right?
Yeah.
And I realized really quickly that I'm not talking to a human. Hi, my name is so-and-so. And how can I assist you today? And they're trying to, well, we can change that, but if you do this, we'll be able to, we'll save you this. So finally I said, no, just please cancel the reservation and rebook it as such. We'll take care of that for you. And then I got 4 emails and 3 texts confirming everything. But talk a little bit about what an agent is as it relates to AI, because, our audience is, let's say again, we're at the ground zero, the basic stage, and we're trying to build a platform, how agents can be an effective tool for your team to help with productivity, which would hopefully translate into higher profitability.
Yeah, man. Agents are just like, that's what's changing organizations. And one of the biggest things that I would say about agent, think about an agent as software that does work. Okay. Software that does work. Okay. So think about sales. Everyone knows about CRMs, right? So say you got Salesforce. Salesforce at its core is just a database with a UI and some workflow, and it stores our customer records, right? So then they've launched Agent Force. Agent Force is nothing but some agents that work with Salesforce to do a certain job function. Okay. I'm not pushing Agent Force. I don't use it. I'm not suggesting it. But what I want you to think about with an agent is it's just a piece of software that's going to do something. And it really has to have a couple of things. It observes. So it's going to observe something. Okay. That could be that a new record is put into your CRM. That could be that something comes into your inbox, right? It's going to observe. It's going to reason. Okay. So the reason agents are now big is because these models can think, right? You can see how it's thinking when you use ChatGPT or how you use Claude, right? We didn't
Right.
have thinking when this first came out. So you need to be able to see it reason, and then you have to be able to act. Okay. So it's going to observe, it's going to think, and it's going to act. Now, a lot of companies put a human in that loop, right? So a human in that loop that's deciding if we're actually going to do that action. Okay. And if there's not a human in that loop, then that's where you get to the term autonomous agent, which means it's just running. A lot of customers, they still have humans in those loops because they don't want to do a refund to a customer automatically with an agent. Okay. And that same concept of an agent is there's never just one. A lot of times there's a bunch of them, right? And so
Mm.
at the end of the day, these agents, you're going to see them in every department in the business that are doing certain things. Let's go back to the finance accounts receivable. Why can't an agent just build the accounts for the invoice? That's fine, right? But I want someone, Brandon, in the finance department to approve that that's the right invoice and then send the invoice. So you see how the agent could have built the invoice, used the data. How many hours did we bill? What did they buy? Build the invoice so the human doesn't have to do it. An agent does that, and now the human looks at it and says it's good. I'm going to approve it and I'm going to send it on. And so that's all really an agent is. It's just software that does work for us as a human.
And I have a voice now, though, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, and I'm sure it's going to get better and better as AI develops. It's like you're not talking to a human. They're interacting. They're listening to you. What your question is. They're going back into their data, right? Their system about pulling up your record, seeing what you did, and they're coming back to you and say, okay, here's some recommendations for you or to do the thing. So, I was fascinated. It's my first time I was ever interacted with an autonomous agent, and for the most part, they're pushing one thing, but you just said, "Look, no, I don't want that. Just do this." And they
Let me
said,
give you an
"Okay,
incredible use case on what you
yep,
just said that I've
yep,
seen. Like, how I told you, like I've seen a lot of good things in sales.
yep,
Let me give you a use case that was not existent. So I've seen this in home health. I've seen this in literally like office cleaning at scale. So those hours when we're not in the office and there's no one there to answer the phone. So I've got people in
right,
the office, maybe inside sales, whatever. But then there's this time of day and weekends where no one answers the phone. Sometimes we have it go to a voicemail. Sometimes we send it to some offshore place to answer the phone. Well, why not just build an agent and let AI, like what you went through, AI answers the phone in the off hours. Okay.
mm-hmm,
Notice I didn't replace the humans in the office. I'm leaving money on the table. Okay. So what both of these companies did, they know that if they get the first scheduled meeting, so in home health, they want to get a nurse scheduled to your house. Okay. You
yep,
don't need to talk to a human to do that, right? You answer the phone, it asks you some questions, it goes and looks in the scheduling system, it looks up your address, it schedules the meeting. Okay. They've increased their sales by 30% by just doing something that they weren't touching before.
yeah,
Okay.
because
And the
if
office cleaning, they
yeah,
give you
so
a quote. The AI gives you the quote on the phone based on your square footage, based on your things, because they don't want to waste a bunch of time calling somebody back when they feel like their quotes are already competitive. So they automated the quoting process with the AI agent. And like you said before, it's just a voice agent. And that's becoming, I see so many good use cases around voice, and voice is getting good, right? IVRs are annoying. These agents are smarter and better than an IVR, and it's easy to kind of make it where it'll just kick out, if you don't want to talk to it versus like, pounding on the phone trying to get out of that jail that we get into when we call a lot of 1-800 numbers.
it's so that brings to the big question, right? How do they do this, right? And it really is the data question, right? How good is your data? I mean, and we talked about it before when buyers looking at your business, they're really focused on your data. So so you're looking at your data and talk about how important your proprietary data is, the data view, all these years, everything how important that is, that you need that and able to create the agent or utilize AI as a thing. Like back in the day when we had first had computers, back first PCs, I always use the term garbage in, garbage out. They'll do exactly what you tell it to do, but if you put in wrong information, you're going to get wrong output. You can't.
Yeah.
So how is that data? That's a big question. The data thing is so important now. And if you're talking to a business owner and you're looking at helping them implement certain strategies, how do you address that piece if some of these companies maybe the data is a little bit outdated, maybe not the current, things like that.
Yeah. Data is the moat. And in Texas, we call it data the oil. Like that is the new oil in a business. Because at the end of the day, if everyone's able to build applications quickly, if everyone's able to have agents, whether they buy or build, which they are, the only fuel you have for your business is your data. That's what separates you, right? If you and I both have the same customer service agent,
Yeah.
but mine's built on 10 years of data of what a good call is and what a bad call is, my agent is going to perform way better than your agent. Okay. And so data is the most important thing. Now, one thing that a lot of companies like to do is they like to come in and say, you got to transform all of your data. Okay. I agree, but you don't have to do that at one time. focus on the use cases you need most. Okay, example, if we're going to build a customer service agent, I do not need finance data. Okay, so maybe my finance data is not clean, maybe it's not ready. That should not block me from implementing AI in my business. Okay, I should go do the customer service, make sure that data is clean, make sure it's in my data lake or my intelligence layer, and then go to the next use case. I like to work from the use case down, because here's why. A lot of companies will spend millions of dollars cleaning all their data. They don't ever even use it. They don't even need it, right? And so
Right.
if you understand the use cases, like, because that's because you have a roadmap, you have a strategy, then you go and say, hey, what data do I need for these agents to just kill it, or this piece of my agentic platform? What do I need? And then go get that data and get that thing clean. But you're spot on that data gets kind of lost in some of this stuff because everyone's like, hey, let's go implement Claude. Well, Claude doesn't really work like that. It works with your data, but it's very fragmented. You need to centralize things when it comes to data, and kind of use that as your moat around your business. And by the way, I've worked with a lot of companies that are like 50 years old and they have gold for data, and they didn't even realize it. They didn't even realize the value of it until we started looking at the roadmap, and they can do so much more than a company that doesn't have any data.
Yeah, they're working hard to grow their business, to increase business, and they kind of lose track sometimes. Maybe they don't have the management team in place, or certain people in the management team aren't effective, but they don't go back and utilize that data, that history they've accumulated over all these years, as a way to help with that process. So what happens if we have clients that they have they have their sales contact information on a or even records of service orders and on an Excel spreadsheet, right? And other ones have maybe use Salesforce, and then a third one will use some vertical software package that they got, from their industry, whether it's manufacturing, HVAC, whatever. So you're in there looking at the data, and the guy or the firm comes to you and says, "Where's all your information?" So, well, we've accumulated this massive Excel spreadsheet for the last 22 years. That's where everything is housed. How does that owner, how do you use that information to kind of build that agent or utilize it to help build the business? Or
Yeah, so the good news about like a lot of SMB, especially in that, 10 to a couple hundred million in revenue, Microsoft is finally starting to catch up a bit. And most of these companies are using Microsoft, right? That
yeah,
spreadsheet might be in SharePoint, right? That spreadsheet might be in Teams. And so what we push is this idea that you need to be able to leverage all of your data, but it doesn't all have to be in one place, right? And that's where this intelligence layer comes in, where it's like, think about like your data lake or your data warehouse. If you have or have it, doesn't matter. But if you have that, that's part of it. But that's not it, because most people don't have everything in there. You need the data from SharePoint. You need that spreadsheet that's there. And so we're big believers in trying to get everything connected. Okay, so that we've got access to that, we've got access to CRM data, and I don't know if you've heard the term MCP, but that's like the way that a lot of these things like Claude, they're able to talk to a system like Salesforce or talk to your ERP. What you're seeing now is like this very point to point connectivity between all of these different systems, with the idea is I'm going to glean this data. I'm going to be able to pull insights from that spreadsheet with 20 years of data, and I'm going to be able to marry that with that CRM that's got 3 years of data. And that's what you're seeing, right? Like even personally, when you're using Claude, you have connectors now that you can connect yourself to QuickBooks or connect in any of the major platforms. They all have connectors to Claude or connectors to ChatGPT. But at the business level, the biggest thing I push with any size business is like, try to take inventory of where this data is. And then the more you can make sure is available in the cloud. For example, if you're a Microsoft shop, put it in Azure, make sure it's in the cloud, make sure it's accessible. And then you can start to figure out, do I need to transform any of this data? Do I need to move it into something called Fabric, which is Microsoft's kind of data lake, data warehouse product or not? Again, I'm not pushing like what you should do. I'm pointing out that you need to be able to understand what data you have, and you need to be able to connect to that data so that AI can leverage it.
yeah, because your competition is going to be likely in your seat as well, and they could be pushing ahead of you right now, right? They could be actually doing these things we're talking about, getting themselves more productive, a competitive advantage to you, and you look down the road. All of a sudden, 6 months. How come I didn't get that order? Right? And I've been dealing with this customer for 20 years, and it turns out that your competitor got really advanced on using these tools, these agents, turning their data, like you say, into gold and jewels to expand their business. Brandon, thanks for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. This is great content. In fact, it's a fascinating subject matter, and we're going to have Brandon come back again to talk in more depth about AI implementation and ways to go about it, how family business owners, closed-sale companies can utilize AI to help them increase their valuation long term. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can click the link below to a similar episode that we've done recently on our AI implementation and strategies for business owners.